Welcome to 15 Minutes Health, your source for clear, evidence-based insights in nutrition, neuroscience, longevity, and everyday wellness. Each video delivers science you can trust, designed to help you build a stronger, healthier life, all in under 15 minutes. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss practical, science-backed tools that can improve your health for the rest of your life.
Choosing a life partner. It's arguably the single most important decision any of us will ever make. It impacts pretty much everything: our health, our happiness, our finances, even the future of our families. And yet for something so critical, we often treat it like it's completely out of our control. We talk about it like it's this mysterious force, being struck by Cupid's arrow or swept off our feet. But what if that feeling, that overwhelming experience we call falling in love, isn't random at all? What if it's actually the output of an incredibly sophisticated set of biological and psychological systems that have been fine-tuned over millions of years to solve one of the most complex problems we face: choosing the right mate? Now, understanding these systems, the mechanisms behind them, it doesn't take away from the beauty of love, not at all. In fact, it empowers you. So today, we're going to deconstruct it all. We'll look at the neurochemical hardware of lust, attraction, and attachment. We'll dig into the deep evolutionary source code that shapes what we find attractive, and we'll unpack the psychological software of your attachment system. And by the end of this, you'll have a set of clear, actionable protocols to navigate your relationships with a whole new level of awareness and intention. So this all leads us to the big question we're going to tackle. Why do we fall for the specific people we do? Is it just a roll of the dice, or is there a predictable process humming away just beneath the surface? Well, from a scientific standpoint, the answer is pretty clear. The experience of falling in love is anything but random. It is a predictable process, biologically and psychologically. It's driven by very specific circuits in your brain, ancient evolutionary pressures, and these deep-seated patterns that were programmed into us in our earliest years. So by deconstructing this process, we can start to shift from being, just a passenger to our emotions to becoming the conscious architect of our own relationship choices.
All right, so to really break this down, here's our roadmap. First, we're going to start at the most fundamental level: the brain's three distinct mating systems. Think of this as the hardware that's driving our behavior. Then we'll zoom out and look at the source code. That's evolution's blueprint for mate selection. After that, we'll get personal and look at the software, your unique attachment operating system. We'll then see how the brain takes all of this data and integrates it into that one powerful feeling that acts as a kind of decision-making shortcut. And finally, we'll pull it all together into some practical protocols you can use to make more conscious choices.
Okay, so to begin, we really have to understand that the brain isn't running one single big love program. It's just not that simple. Instead, thanks to the incredible work of biological anthropologist Dr. Helen Fisher, we now know that there are three primary, distinct, yet interconnected emotion systems that evolved to guide everything from mating to parenting. The best way to think about this is like having three separate circuits in your brain that can, and often do, operate completely independently of one another. Getting this distinction is really the first critical step to gaining clarity about what you're actually feeling.
So what are these three systems? Well, they are lust, attraction, and attachment. Lust is pretty straightforward. It's the sex drive, that craving for sexual gratification. Then there's attraction. This is what we usually mean when we say romantic love, that obsessive, all-consuming, can't eat, can't sleep infatuation of the early stages. And finally, there's attachment. This is that deep feeling of calm and security and connection you feel with a long-term partner, the thing that allows couples to stick together long enough to raise children. Now, what's crucial to understand is that you can feel these for different people at the same time. You could feel a deep attachment to your long-term partner while feeling a surge of lust for a complete stranger, and at the same time feel intensely romantically attracted to a coworker. To see how they work, we need to look at their unique neurochemical signatures.
Right. So each system has its own biological goal and is run by a totally different cocktail of neurochemicals. The lust system? That's primarily driven by sex hormones, estrogens and androgens like testosterone. Its goal is simple: motivate you to seek out mating partners. The attraction system, on the other hand, is all about focus. Its goal is to make you concentrate all your mating energy on one person. And this system is flooded with high levels of dopamine and norepinephrine. Dopamine is a key player in the brain's reward pathway. It drives motivation and goal-directed behavior. In this case, the goal is winning over that one specific person. This is actually the same brain circuit involved in addiction, which explains that obsessive craving-like nature of early love. Norepinephrine, which is related to adrenaline, gives you that feeling of exhilaration and laser focus. Finally, the attachment system is for the long haul. It's governed by neuropeptides like vasopressin and oxytocin. sometimes called the cuddle hormones, which create feelings of calm, security, and deep social bonds. And this brings us to our very first tool, learning to differentiate the signals. The protocol here is simple, but it is incredibly powerful. The next time you feel a strong pull towards someone, just pause and ask yourself, which one of these systems is most active right now? Is this lust? A generalized physical desire? Is it attraction, that obsessive, focused craving for this specific person? Or is it attachment, that feeling of calm, security, and connection? Just by labeling the feeling, you gain so much clarity. You can stop yourself from mistaking an intense lust signal for a sign of long-term compatibility. And you can also understand that when that intense dopamine-fueled attraction phase starts to fade, it's not a sign that love is dead. It's often a sign that the calmer, oxytocin-driven attachment system is taking its place. That's a normal, healthy progression in any long-term bond.
Okay, so now that we've looked at the brain's hardware, let's unpack the source code that's running on it. To really get why these systems, especially that powerful attraction system, get triggered, we need to zoom way out and look at our deep evolutionary history. The work of evolutionary psychologists like David Buss has made it pretty clear that our modern mating preferences aren't just random. They're actually echoes of the ancient survival and replication challenges our ancestors faced for hundreds of thousands of years.
If you think about it, for our ancestors, men and women faced fundamentally different adaptive problems when it came to reproduction. For a woman, the biological investment is just enormous. A 9-month pregnancy, the dangers of childbirth, and then years of intense caregiving. So her primary challenge was to select a partner who was not only able to invest resources, things like food, shelter, protection, but was also willing to stick around and do it long term. This would have created a strong selective pressure for women to prefer mates who showed signs of status, ambition, and dependability. For a man, the minimum biological investment can be, well, very small. His key challenges were different. First, he had to identify partners who were fertile, and second, he needed some confidence that he was the father. This would have created a selective pressure for men to prioritize cues of youth and health, which are reliable indicators of fertility, and also qualities like faithfulness.
So this brings us to our second tool, understanding your deep-seated preferences. And this data on the slide, which comes from research by Monica Burke, is a really fascinating modern-day confirmation of this whole evolutionary model. When people were asked to list the top characteristics for a marriage partner, look at the similarities. Both men and women rank sense of humor and intelligent very highly. These are traits of a good cooperative partner. But now look at the differences. For women, the #1 promoter is honest, and top deal breakers include unmotivated and lack of respect. These all point back to a partner's character and his willingness to invest. For men, the #1 promoter is attractive, and a top to turn is unattractive. Now, this doesn't mean men don't care about honesty. Of course they do. But it shows the higher relative priority that's placed on those physical cues of health and fertility, exactly as the evolutionary model predicts. The protocol here is just to recognize these patterns in your own attractions. Don't judge them, just understand where they come from. Okay, so we've got the brain's hardware and the evolutionary source code. But what about the personalized software that gets installed on top of all that? Well, this software is programmed by our earliest life experiences, and it has a powerful, often unconscious effect on how we connect with others as adults. And this brings us to one of the cornerstones of modern psychology, attachment theory. Attachment theory, which was developed by John Bowlby, basically says that our bond with our main caregivers in infancy creates what he called our internal working models. Think of these as a set of deep, unconscious beliefs about ourselves and about other people. This model essentially answers two fundamental questions. Is the world a safe place? And am I worthy of love and care? So a caregiver who is consistently warm and responsive teaches a child that yes, other people are reliable, and yes, I am worthy of love. That forms a secure attachment. But inconsistent or rejecting care can lead to insecure attachment styles, and these styles tend to stick with us into adulthood, profoundly influencing our romantic relationships. As Bowlby famously put it, this system characterizes us from the cradle to the grave. So, the crucial tool here, tool 3, is to identify your own attachment style. In a really important study back in 1987, psychologists Cindy Hazen and Philip Shaver took the descriptions of infant attachment and they translated them into terms that were appropriate for adult romance. I'm going to read you the 3 descriptions they used. As I read them, just see which one feels most true for you, which one resonates the most with how you typically feel and act in your romantic relationships. All right, first up is the secure style. As you can probably tell from the description, people with this style tend to have a pretty positive view of themselves and of their partners. They're comfortable with both intimacy and independence, and they can usually balance the two in a really healthy way. They trust that their partner is going to be there for them, acting as a kind of secure base that they can go out and explore the world from.
Okay, next, let's consider the avoidant style. Individuals with this pattern often place a very high value on independence and self-sufficiency. They can be uncomfortable with too much intimacy and might see partners who want more closeness as being needy or clingy. This can lead them to kind of suppress their feelings or pull away when a relationship starts to get too serious or emotionally intense.
And finally, we have the anxious style, sometimes called anxious ambivalent. People who identify with this description often crave a lot of intimacy and can become really preoccupied with their relationships. They tend to worry that their partners don't love them as much as they do, which unfortunately can lead to behaviors that seem demanding or possessive, but are really driven by a deep fear of abandonment and a powerful need for reassurance.
So, where do most people fit in? Well, that original research by Hazen and Shaver found that the distribution in the adult population is remarkably similar to what we see in infants. About 56% of adults identify as secure, roughly 25% as avoidant, and about 19% as anxious. Now, understanding your style is a total game changer. It helps you make sense of your own recurring patterns. If you're anxious, you can learn to manage that need for reassurance in healthier ways. If you're avoidant, you can start to understand that impulse to pull away when things get close. And look, your style isn't a life sentence, but it is your default operating system. And just knowing its tendencies is the first step toward consciously managing it.
Okay, so we've covered the hardware of the brain's 3 mating systems, we've covered the source code of our evolutionary preferences, and we've covered the software of our attachment style. So, the big question is, how on earth does the brain integrate all of this impossibly complex information, from neurochemistry to evolutionary cues to attachment history, to actually make a decision? Well, it doesn't sit down and make a spreadsheet. Instead, it relies on a feeling, a powerful, all-encompassing mental shortcut.
In psychology, this kind of shortcut has a name. It's called a heuristic. Researchers like Kahneman and Tversky really pioneered this idea. A heuristic is basically a fast and efficient rule of thumb that our brain uses to make complex decisions on the fly. They're not always perfect, but they are incredibly effective, and they allow us to navigate a really complex world without getting paralyzed by trying to analyze every single detail of every decision.
Building on this idea, Monica Burke's research puts forward a really powerful thesis. The feeling of falling in love is a specific type of heuristic called an affect heuristic. An affect heuristic is when you use your emotional response, basically, how do I feel about this, as a stand-in for a deep, logical analysis. So that overwhelming feeling of falling in love isn't just random chaos. It is the brain's integrated output. It's a single, powerful gut feeling that acts as an executive summary of a massive, subconscious computation, one that's assessing neurochemical signals, evolutionary fitness cues, and attachment compatibility, all at once. It's the brain's elegant, efficient solution to the mate choice problem. And this chart illustrates the sheer power of this heuristic. In one of her studies, Burke asked people to rate their willingness to marry a hypothetical person, and she manipulated 2 things: how good the person's characteristics were, and whether the participants were simply told, you are falling in love with this person. The results were absolutely stunning. Just being told that the falling in love feeling was present had a massive effect, an effect that completely dwarfed the person's actual positive or negative characteristics. Even when a partner had poor traits, if that falling in love cue was there, the willingness to marry just shot through the roof. This shows us that the brain trusts this feeling implicitly. It's like a master signal that can override almost all other data points. It is the ultimate decision shortcut.
So, after deconstructing the mechanics of love, from the neurochemistry all the way up to evolutionary psychology and attachment theory, how do we put this all together into a practical framework? Well, this is where we move from just passively experiencing love to consciously designing our relationships.
So here are the 4 key protocols that we've established today. Protocol 1, differentiate the signals from your brain's 3 separate mating systems. Protocol 2, recognize and acknowledge the influence of your deep evolutionary source code on what you find attractive. Protocol 3, identify your own attachment style so you know your relational software's default settings. And finally, Protocol 4, and this is the big one, respect the feeling of falling in love. Understand it as your brain's powerful, integrated data summary. But, and this is so important, use your conscious, rational mind to then verify its conclusions. Think of it like this. Your gut feeling is a powerful data-driven hypothesis, but it's still a hypothesis. The job of your conscious mind is to then act like a scientist, to go out and run the experiment, to collect the data, and to verify that reality actually aligns with that initial feeling.
You know, the most important takeaway here is that understanding these mechanisms doesn't diminish the experience of love. If anything, it enhances it. It gives you a whole new layer of awe for just how sophisticated the human brain is. And more practically, it gives you a toolkit. It allows you to understand yourself and your partner with so much more depth and compassion. It lets you debug recurring issues because you can understand their source, whether it's a mismatched attachment style or just a natural transition from attraction to attachment. It lets you move from being a passive subject, just tossed around by emotions you don't understand, to being a conscious architect of your relationships.
And that really leaves us with a final question for you to consider. Now that you have a much deeper understanding of your own hardware, your own source code, and your own operating software, the choice is really yours. How are you going to take this knowledge and apply it? How will you consciously choose to build your next relationship, not on chance or some mystery, but on a solid foundation of self-awareness and intentional design?
Thanks for watching 15 Minutes Health. If this video helped you, consider subscribing. Your support allows us to keep creating clear, science-backed content to help you stay healthier, stronger, and better informed. See you in the next video.